People think a royal gala is just music, jewels, and polite smiles. But that night, behind the velvet curtains and crystal lights, hearts were being tested like blades in fire. Daisy adjusted the simple silver necklace at her throat. It wasn't the most expensive thing in the room, but it mattered more than any diamond here. It was the only gift she'd kept from her old life, before the divorce headlines, before the gossip, before the strange quiet that followed her like a shadow. She forced her shoulders back and walked down the stairs with slow control, the way she'd learned to do when life tried to push her into the corner. Tonight wasn't supposed to be about him. And yet, the moment she stepped onto the ballroom floor, she saw him. Ethan Vale. Her ex-husband stood near the center of attention, exactly where he always believed he belonged. His smile was bright, his suit was perfect, and his arm was wrapped around a woman in a shimmering red dress who looked like she'd been designed for cameras. The Mistress. Daisy didn't know her name. She'd never needed to. She'd only ever known the sound of her laughter in the background of phone calls that ended too quickly, the perfume that clung to Ethan's jacket when he came home late, and the smug little triumph in Ethan's voice when he said, "You're too soft for my world, Daisy." Daisy's stomach tightened, but her face didn't change. She had practiced that too. Ethan raised his glass slightly, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "To new beginnings," he said, like he wasn't standing on the ruins of someone else's heart. The woman on his arm leaned in and kissed his cheek, leaving a lipstick mark that looked like a signature. A few people laughed, a few people clapped, and Daisy felt something in her chest do what it always did when she saw him, fold in on itself, then harden into something quieter. Not hate. Not revenge. Just a tired, heavy kind of clarity. She turned away, telling herself she came here for a reason. Not for Ethan, not for closure, not for drama. She had come because the invitation was sealed in black wax with a silver crest she didn't recognize, delivered by a messenger who never stepped into the light. Royal Gala, hosted by His Majesty, King Lucian Nocte. Most people thought King Lucian was a wealthy eccentric who funded charities, restored museums, and stayed unseen like a myth. The old families whispered different things about a ruler who never aged, a man whose presence made rooms go silent, and a kingdom that existed alongside this one like a shadow beside a candle. Daisy didn't believe in supernatural stories. Not until 3 months ago, when a stranger saved her life on a rainy bridge with hands that were cold as winter and eyes that looked older than the world. Not until she woke up in a private clinic with no memory of how she got there, and a doctor with shaking hands told her, "Someone very powerful brought you in." Not until a letter arrived the next day with only one line. "You were kind when you didn't have to be. Now, let me repay the debt." She had read that line 100 times. It didn't feel like a threat. It felt like someone had been watching her, and not in the way Ethan used to watch, like she was something to own. In a way that felt like protection. Daisy moved deeper into the ballroom, trying to breathe slowly. The music was soft, strings and piano, elegant and careful. But beneath it, there was another rhythm, like the room itself had a heartbeat. She passed small clusters of guests, speaking in murmurs. "Have you seen him yet? They say he never eats. They say he can hear lies." Daisy almost smiled at that last one. If he can hear lies, she thought, he'll hate this room. A waiter offered her a drink. She shook her head politely. "No, thank you." The waiter paused, then lowered his voice. "Miss Daisy Vale." Her breath caught. "Yes." He looked down quickly, respectful, almost nervous. "His Majesty asked that you be brought to the east balcony when you arrive." Daisy stared at him. "He knows I'm here." The waiter didn't answer directly. "Please follow the blue candles, ma'am." Blue candles. Her skin prickled. Why? The waiter's eyes flickered, fear or reverence. Because you are expected. He stepped away, as if he'd already said too much. Daisy stood still for a moment, the noise of the gala washing around her. Expected. By a king she had never met. A king people spoke about like a legend. A king who might not even be fully human. And yet, as her eyes scanned the ballroom, she felt something else. Not fear. A pull. Like standing near the ocean and feeling the tide tug at your ankles even before you see the water. She turned and began walking, searching for the blue candles. As she moved through the crowd, she caught glimpses of Ethan watching her. His smile faltered, then reformed into something sharper. He whispered something to the woman on his arm, and she looked Daisy up and down with a small, amused smirk. Daisy kept going anyway. That was the thing Ethan never understood. Daisy's softness wasn't weakness. It was her choice, and choices could be braver than fists. The blue candles appeared along the edge of the room, their flames steady and unnatural in color, like little pieces of winter burning in glass. No one else seemed to notice them, as if the candles were only meant for her. Daisy followed them past tall velvet curtains and into a quieter hallway where the music became distant. The air changed here, cooler, cleaner, carrying a faint scent like night flowers. At the end of the hall stood 2 doors made of dark wood carved with symbols she couldn't read. 2 guards waited, tall, perfectly still, dressed in formal black. Their eyes tracked Daisy with careful attention, but there was no threat in their posture. It felt like they were guarding something sacred, not something dangerous. One guard stepped forward, bowed his head slightly, and opened the door without a word. Daisy walked through. The balcony beyond was vast and open to the night, overlooking the royal gardens. The city lights glittered in the distance like scattered stars, but closer, the garden below was lit by lanterns that looked like glowing moons. The breeze touched Daisy's face, cool and honest. And for the first time all evening, she could breathe. A grand piano sat in the corner of the balcony, its surface black as still water. Beside it, a small table held a single white rose in a glass vase. The rose looked freshly cut, but there was no gardener in sight. Someone had prepared this space, like a private sanctuary. Then Daisy heard it. Footsteps. Slow, measured, quiet. Not the hurried steps of a servant, not the careless stride of a rich guest. These steps had patience, authority, and something else, something lonely. Daisy turned. A man emerged from the shadows near the balcony doors. He wore a dark suit with a high collar, simple and perfect, without unnecessary decoration. His hair was black, his face calm, and his eyes. His eyes held the same impossible depth she remembered from the bridge. Not red, not monstrous, just a dark, steady gaze that made the world feel smaller and more truthful. He stopped a few paces away, leaving space between them as if he respected the air she needed to feel safe. Daisy, he said, and her name sounded different in his voice, gentler than it had any right to. Her throat tightened. You're King Lucian. He inclined his head. Yes. She didn't know why her eyes stung. She hated that her feelings were still so close to the surface, even after everything Ethan had done. But there was something about the king's presence that made pretending feel pointless. Why did you invite me? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. I'm not important to people like you. A faint expression crossed his face, not amusement, not pride. Regret. You were important when it mattered, he said quietly, and people forget that kindness is a kind of courage. Daisy looked away toward the gardens, blinking hard. I don't feel courageous. I feel tired. I know, King Lucian replied. The way he said it, like he truly knew, made her chest ache. She turned back to him. Were you the one who saved me? On the bridge. His gaze didn't waver. Yes. Why? Daisy pressed, frustration slipping through. You don't even know me. King Lucian took a slow breath, as if choosing his words carefully. I know enough. I know you stayed with a stranger in the rain when everyone else walked past. I know you held his hand until help arrived. I know you whispered, please don't die, even though you were shaking. Daisy's heart stopped for a second. No one knew that. No one had been there except her and the stranger. Her voice trembled. That was you. His eyes softened. Yes. Daisy's mind spun. The stranger on the bridge had been bleeding from the shoulder. She remembered the dark stain, the way he flinched when the light hit his skin. She remembered thinking his skin was cold, and yet his gaze had been strangely alive. You're, Daisy whispered, then swallowed. You're the vampire king. King Lucian didn't flinch at the word. He didn't deny it either. I am, he said simply, and I have tried for a long time to be a good king instead of a feared one. Daisy let out a shaky laugh that surprised even her. It wasn't mocking. It was the kind of laugh that escapes when reality becomes too strange to hold inside. Of course, she murmured. Of course my life would turn into a fairy tale right after my divorce. For the first time, Lucian's expression changed into something close to humor, quiet, controlled, almost shy. Fairy tales rarely begin with peace. The tension between them was strange, delicate. Daisy felt drawn to him, not like a spell, not like a trick, like warmth in a cold room. And then, as if the night needed to remind her it could still hurt, the balcony doors opened again. Ethan's voice floated out, loud and bright, coated in arrogance. Well, well, I wondered where you ran off to, Daisy. Daisy's spine stiffened. Ethan stepped onto the balcony with the woman in red clinging to his arm. He looked from Daisy to Lucian, then laughed like he was amused by a joke only he understood. Oh, Ethan said, grinning wider. You found the host. Tell me, your majesty, are you collecting broken things now? Daisy's breath caught. The insult landed like a slap, not because it was true, but because Ethan still knew how to aim for the tender places. Daisy opened her mouth to speak, but King Lucian moved first, not aggressively, not loudly. He simply stepped forward, placing himself slightly between Daisy and Ethan, as naturally as a shelter forming against the wind. His voice was calm. Watch your words. Ethan lifted his hands in fake innocence. I'm only being honest. Daisy was my wife. I know her better than anyone. Lucian's gaze sharpened, not with rage, but with something colder and clearer. No, he said. You knew how to stand beside her. You never learned how to see her. The air itself seemed to still. Daisy's heart pounded, because those words, those simple words, felt like someone finally naming a pain she had been carrying in silence. Ethan's smile faltered for half a second, then returned, harder. He took a step closer, and the woman in red laughed like she was watching entertainment. All right then, Ethan said, tilting his head. If you see her so well, your majesty, tell me, why invite her? She's nobody, unless... His eyes narrowed, a cruel idea forming. Unless you're trying to embarrass me, Ethan said, voice lowering. Is this some trick? Daisy clenched her fists at her sides. She wanted to tell him she didn't care anymore. She wanted to be above it. But her voice stuck in her throat, because part of her still remembered loving him, and that memory was a painful thing to carry. King Lucian turned his head slightly toward Daisy, as if asking silent permission. Daisy didn't understand what he was asking. Then Lucian looked back at Ethan and spoke with quiet finality. This is not a trick, he said. This is a truth you do not deserve, but you will hear it anyway. He paused, and his voice softened, only when he spoke Daisy's name. Daisy is here because she is under my protection. Ethan blinked. Protection. Lucian's gaze didn't move. Yes. The balcony felt suddenly smaller, as if the night leaned in to listen. Ethan let out a sharp laugh. That's ridiculous. She doesn't need protection. From what? From me. Daisy's throat burned. Her eyes stung again, and she hated it. King Lucian answered, with a stillness that felt more powerful than shouting. From humiliation, he said. From loneliness disguised as laughter, from people who mistake cruelty for strength. The woman in red shifted uncomfortably. Even she seemed less amused now. Ethan's face tightened, embarrassment flashing across it. He pointed a finger slightly, not quite daring to fully accuse a king. You can't just take her side, Ethan said. She's my ex-wife, she's... Lucian's voice cut through, calm as midnight water. She is not a possession, he said, and she will not be treated as a story you can rewrite for your pride. Daisy's heart felt like it might crack open. No one had ever spoken for her like that. Not in public, not with dignity, not without asking for something in return. Ethan's jaw clenched. And what do you want from her, your majesty? He snapped. What's the price? Daisy flinched, because the question hit her worst fear. That kindness always came with a bill. Lucian didn't look offended. He looked, sad that Ethan could not imagine anything else. The price, Lucian said quietly, is simply that she is safe. Then he turned fully toward Daisy. And his next words landed like thunder, wrapped in silk. Daisy, he said, I did not bring you here to punish him. I brought you here because my council insists I need a queen. Daisy's breath vanished. Ethan froze. Even the woman in red stopped smiling. Lucian's gaze held Daisy's, steady and careful, as if he didn't want to frighten her with the weight of what he was saying. And I, he continued, voice low, have already chosen. Daisy's entire body went cold, not from fear, from the shock of being seen, truly seen, in a room that had always made her feel invisible. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Because behind Lucian, inside the dark hallway beyond the balcony, Daisy noticed movement. Figures. More guards. No, not guards. Men and women in formal attire, watching in silence like witnesses to a coronation. And in their hands were velvet cases. Jewels. A crown. Daisy's knees almost gave out. King Lucian held out his hand to her, not like a command. Like an offer. Like a question. And Daisy realized, too late to pretend this was just a strange conversation. Her answer would change everything. She stared at his open palm, feeling Ethan's hateful eyes on her, feeling the entire unseen kingdom holding its breath. And then Lucian whispered, only for Daisy to hear. If you say no, I will still protect you. But if you say yes, they will come for you first. Daisy's heart slammed against her ribs. Who will? She breathed. Lucian's eyes darkened with a protective sorrow. The ones who fear a kind queen more than they fear a ruthless king, he said. And they are already inside this palace. Daisy looked past him again. In the reflection of the balcony glass, she saw someone watching her from the ballroom, someone smiling too calmly, as if they had been waiting for this moment. Daisy's fingers trembled as they lifted toward Lucian's hand. And the music inside suddenly stopped. All at once, as if the entire palace had sensed the same danger. Daisy opened her mouth to speak. But before she could answer, the lights in the ballroom below dimmed. One by one, like the palace itself was exhaling into darkness. And in that sudden hush, a single voice echoed from inside, clear and cold. Your Majesty, we need to speak, about the human. Daisy's hand hovered inches from Lucian's. His grip was still open. Waiting. And for the first time, Daisy understood the terrifying beauty of being chosen, not as a prize. but as a promise.